everybody. Welcome back to Basil ASMR. And today I wanted to do some storybook reading for you. But before I get started, I wanted to say thank you for 100 subscribers. I mainly started this channel because I really enjoy making ASMR videos and I really like listening to ASMR. I just kind of wanted to give back to the community, so it's interesting seeing some people enjoy my content. So thank you. And so I'm going to be reading the original Aladdin and the Lamp. So not the Disney version or anything, just the regular old version. It's actually translated by a man named Burton in, believe, in the late 1800s. He went on a trip throughout the Middle East and South Asia and heard a lot of different stories. So he congregated a lot of those stories and brought them over to Europe to profit off of it. So this is the book right here. And he it's pretty much the same copy of when he first translated it. As time went on, more stories were added, but the phrasing is a little weird, so I'll try and explain it to you since I am originally Arabic, so I'll be able to explain some like differences or some cultural things. And of course, Burton was a biased man, so there is a lot of what I would say highlighted racism in the original stories, but it's part of the times. Yeah. So I'm just gonna open it up to Aladdin and the Wonderful Lamp. So if you don't know, to catch you up, since this does start in like the middle of the book, the premise of the book is there's a woman who is married to a king, and she is trying to please him with many stories to keep him interested, because if not, he will kill her. A little brutal, but so I'll just start from Aladdin and the Wonderful Lamp, one of the stories that she's telling him. There dwelt in a city of the cities of China a man which was a tailor, withal a pauper, and he had one son, Aladdin hight. Already, I'm gonna jump in and say you can kind of see this actually was set in China, so not somewhere in the Middle East, but you have to keep in mind that these are stories from like general Middle East and South Asia and being told to other Middle Eastern people. So all of the names here are generally Arabic names, and the culture is still very like Muslim. So even though it is set in China, it does kind of have the culture of the Middle East and South Asia. So that's likely why Disney decided that the tale would be set just in a fantasy city in the Middle East. Now, this boy had been from his babyhood a never-do-well, a scapegrace, and when he reached his 10th year, his father inclined to teach him his own trade, and for that he was over-indigent to expend money upon his learning other work or craft or apprenticeship. He took the lad into his shop that he might be taught tailoring. But as Aladdin was a scapegrace and a never-do-well, and wont to play at all times with the gutter boys of the quarter, he would not sit in the shop for a single day, Nay, he would await his father's leaving it for some purpose, such as to meet a creditor, when he would run off at once and fare forth to the gardens with the other scapegraces and low companions, his fellows. Such was his case. Counsel and castigation were of no avail, nor would he obey either parent in aught, or learn any trade. Presently, for his sadness and sorrowing because of his son's vicious indolence, the tailor sickened and died. Kind of blaming Aladdin for his father's death there. Aladdin continued in his former ill courses, and when his mother saw that her spouse had deceased, and that her son was a scapegrace and good for nothing at all, she sold the shop, and whatso was to be found therein, and fell to spinning cotton yarn. By this toilsome industry she fed herself and found food for her son, Aladdin, the scapegrace, who, seeing himself freed from bearing the severities of his sire, increased in idleness and low habits, nor would he ever stay at home save at meal hours, while his miserable wretched mother lived only by what her hands could spin, until the youth had reached his 15th year. Now you can kind of already see some cultural differences. Aladdin is expected to work while he's really young. By the end of the paragraph, he's only 15, but they're already calling him a lot of names for a 15-year-old not really doing his job. Yeah, and Aladdin never really had parents in the Disney movies. It befell, one day of the days, that as he was sitting about the quarter at play with the vagabond boys, behold, a darwesh from the Maghrib, the land of the setting sun, came up and stood gazing for solace upon the lads. Just to jump in here, Maghrib means someone from the west. It's not necessarily as to say someone from America, but from where this is set, supposedly set in China, so anybody west of China would be Maghrib. So he looked hard at Aladdin and carefully considered his semblance, scarcely noticing his companions the while. Now this Darwish was a Moorman from inner Morocco, and he was a magician who would upheap by his magic hill upon hill. He was also an adept in astrology. So after narrowly considering Aladdin, he said to himself, "Verily, this is the lad I need, and to find whom I have left my natal land." Presently he led one of the children apart and questioned him anent the scapegrace, saying, "Whose son is he?" And he sought all information concerning his condition, and whatso related to him. After this he walked up to Aladdin, and drawing him aside, asked, "O my son, haply thou art the child of such an one the tailor?" And the lad answered, "Yes, O my lord, but 'tis long since he died." The Maghribi, the magician, hearing these words, threw himself upon Aladdin, and wound his arms around his neck, and fell to bussing him, weeping the while with tears trickling down his cheeks. But when the lad saw the Mormon's case, he was seized with surprise. Thereat questioned him, saying, "What causeth thee weep, O my lord, and how camest thou to know my father?" "How countst thou, O my son?" replied the Moorman, in a soft voice, saddened by emotion. "Question me with such query after informing me that thy father and my brother is deceased, for that he was my brother german, and now I come from my adopted country, and after long exile I rejoiced with exceeding joy in hope for looking upon him once more, and condoling with him over the past. And now thou hast announced to me, and now thou hast announced to me his demise. But blood hiddeth not from blood, and it hath revealed to me that thou art my nephew, son of my brother. And I knew thee amongst all the lads, albeit my father, when I parted from him, was yet unmarried. The Maghribi, the magician, said to the tailor's orphan, O my son Aladdin, and I have now failed in the mourning ceremonies, have lost the delight expected from meeting thy father, my brother, whom after my long banishment I had hoped to see once more ere I die. But far distance wrought me this trouble, nor hath the creature aught of asylum from the Creator or artifice against the commandments of Allah Almighty. Now this is kind of where I want to jump in and say that it's incredibly interesting to see how Islam still plays a part in the story, since it's originally a story by Muslims, speaking of other people, so their culture kind of comes into it a little. It's the whole thing is just kind of blended in terms of where this is supposed to be set, even though it says China. Then he again clasped Aladdin to his bosom, crying, O my son, I have none to condole with now save thyself, and thou standeth instead of thy sire, though being his issue and representative, and whoso leaveth issue dieth not. O my child. So saying, the magician put his hand to purse, and pulling out 10 gold pieces, gave them to the lad, asking, O my son, where is your house, and where dwelleth she, thy mother, and my brother's widow? Presently Aladdin rose with him, and showed him the way to their home, and meanwhile quoth the wizard, O my son, take these monies, and give them to thy mother, greeting her from me, and let her know that thine uncle, thy father's brother, hath reappeared from his exile, and that, inshallah, God willing, on the morrow I will visit her to salute her with the salam, and see the house wherein my brother was homed, and look upon the place where he lieth buried. Inshallah literally just means God willing, and is kind of like a hopefully in the future, and then salam is just prayer. Thereupon Aladdin kissed the Maghribi's hand, and after running in his joy at fullest speed to his mother's dwelling, entered to her clean contrariwise to his custom, inasmuch as he never came near her save at meal times only. And when he found her, the lad exclaimed in his delight, O my mother, I give thee glad tidings of mine uncle, who hath returned from his exile, and who now sendeth me to salute thee. O my son, she replied, meseemeth thou mockest me. Who is this uncle, and how canst thou have an uncle in the bonds of life? He rejoined, How sayest thou, O my mother, that I have nor living uncles nor kinsmen, when this man is my father's own brother? Indeed, he embraced me and bussed me, shedding tears the while, and bade me acquaint thee herewith. She retorted, O my son, well I wot thou hadst an uncle, but he is now dead, nor am I aware of thou hast other M. The Moroccan magician fared forth next morning, and fell to finding out Aladdin, for his heart no longer permitted him to part from the lad, and as he was toing and froing about the city highways, he came face to face with him disporting himself, as was his wont, amongst the vagabonds and scapegraces. So he drew near to him, and taking his hand, embraced him and bussed him, then pulled out of his poke 2 dinars, and said, Hie thee to thy mother, and give her these couple of ducats, and tell her that thine uncle would eat the evening meal with you. Dinar is just like the Arabic way of saying like gold pieces or money. I think Jordanian money is dinars, and ducats is kind of a plural. At least I believe so. Um, so do thou take these 2 gold pieces and prepare for us a succulent supper. But before all things, show me once more the way to your home. Um, Interesting how the whole beginning portion of the story is like not at all touched upon in the Disney movie. It's pretty interesting. On my head and mine eyes be it, O my uncle, replied the lad, and forewent him, pointing out the street leading to the house. Then the Moorman left him and went his ways, and Aladdin ran home and, giving the news and the 2 sequins to his parent, said, My uncle would sup with us. So she arose straightway, and going to the market street, bought all she required. Then, returning to her dwelling, she borrowed from the neighbors whatever she needed of pans and platters and so forth, and when the meal was cooked and supper time came, she said to Aladdin, O my child, the meat is ready, but peradventure thine uncle wotteth not the way to our dwelling. So do thou fare forth and meet him on the road. He replied, To hear is to obey. That's kind of a translation from an Arabic phrase. Is essentially mean like okay and 100% I will do this. I mean, a little obvious. He replied, To hear is to obey. And before the twain ended talking, a knock was heard at the door. Aladdin went out and opened, when, behold, the Maghribi, the magician, together with a eunuch carrying the wine and the dessert fruits. So the lad led them in, and the slave went about his business. The Moorman, on entering, saluted his sister-in-law with the salam, then began to shed tears and to question her, saying, Where be the place whereon my brother went to sit? She showed it to him, whereat he went up to it and prostrated himself in prayer and kissed the floor, crying, Ah, how scant is my satisfaction, and how luckless is my lot, for that I have lost thee, O my brother, O vein of my eye. And after such fashion he continued weeping and wailing till he swooned away for excess of sobbing and lamentation. Wherefore Aladdin's mother was certified of his soothfastness. So coming up to him, she raised him from the floor and said, What gain is there in slaying thyself? After consoling him, she placed him upon the divan, and as soon as he was seated at his ease, and before the food trays were served up, he fell to talking with her, and saying, O wife of my brother, it must be a wonder to thee how in all thy days thou never sawest me, nor learnedst thou aught of me during the lifetime of my brother, who hath found mercy. Now, the reason is that 40 years ago I left this town, and exiled myself from my birthplace, and wandered forth over all the lands of Al-Hind and Al-Sind, and entered Egypt. Al-Hind is India, and Al-Sind, I believe, is somewhere around Pakistan. I may be wrong about that, but South Asia-ish. And entered Egypt, and settled for a long time in its magnificent city, which is one of the world's wonders, till at last I fared to the regions of the setting sun, and abode for a space of 30 years in the Moroccan interior. Now one day of the days, O wife of my brother, as I was sitting alone at home, I fell to thinking of my own country, and of my birthplace, and of my brother, who hath found mercy. They're going to probably keep saying that, who hath found mercy, whenever they reference the dead father, mainly because in Islam and Arabic culture, it's kind of like saying peace be upon him. It's just a respectful way to talk about someone who has died. And my yearning to see him waxed excessive, and I bewept and bewailed my strangehood and distance from him, and at last my longings drave me homeward, and until I resolved upon traveling to the region which was the falling place of my head and my homestead, to the end that I might again see my brother. Then quoth I to myself, O man, how long wilt thou wander like a wild Arab from thy place of birth and native stead? Moreover, thou hast one brother and no more. So up with thee and travel, and look upon him ere thou die. For who wotteth the woes of the world and the change of the days? 'Twould be saddest regret, and thou lie down to die without beholding thy brother, and Allah, laud be to the Lord, hath vouchsafed thee ample wealth, and belike he may be straitened and in poor case when thou wilt aid thy brother as well as see him. So I arose at once and equipped me for wayfare, and recited the Fatiha. Fatiha being one of the verses of the Quran, the holy book of Islam. Then, when as Friday prayers ended, I mounted and traveled to this town, after suffering manifold toils and travails, which I patiently endured whilst the Lord, to whom be honor and glory, veiled me with the veil of his protection. So I entered, and whilst wandering about the streets the day before yesterday, I beheld my brother's son Aladdin disporting himself with the boys, and, by God the Great, O wife of my brother, the moment I saw him this heart of mine went forth to him, for blood yearneth unto blood. And my soul felt and informed me that he was my very nephew. So I forgot all my travails and troubles at once, and sighting him, and I was like to fly for joy. But when he told me of the dear one's departure to the ruth of Allah Almighty, I fainted for stress of distress and disappointment. Perchance, however, my nephew hath informed thee of the pains which prevailed upon me, but after a fashion I am consoled by the sight of Aladdin, the legacy bequeathed to us by him who hath found mercy for that whoso leaveth issue to naught, wholly dead. And when he looked at his sister-in-law, she wept at these his words. So he turned to the lad that he might cause her forget the mention of her mate, as a means of comforting her, and also of completing his deceit, and asked him, saying, O my son Aladdin, what hast thou learnt in the way of work, and what is thy business? Say me, hast thou mastered any craft, whereby to earn livelihood for thyself and for thy mother? The lad was abashed and put to shame, and he hung down his head and bowed his brow groundwards. But his parent spoke out, How forsooth, by Allah, he knoweth nothing at all. A child so ungracious as this I never yet saw. No, never. All the day long he idleth away his time with the sons of the quarter, vagabonds like himself. And his father, O regret of me, died not save of dolour for him, and I also am now in piteous plight. I spin cotton and toil at my distaff, night and day, that I may earn a couple of scones of bread which we eat together. This is his condition, O my brother-in-law. And, by the life of thee, he cometh not near me save at meal times, and none other. Indeed, I am thinking to lock the house door, nor ever open to him again, but leave him to go and seek a livelihood, whereby he can live. For that I am now grown a woman in years, and have no longer strength to toil and go about for a maintenance after this fashion. O Allah, I am compelled to provide him with daily bread when I require to be provided. This is kind of, there's a lot of cultural aspects in this that doesn't really play a part nowadays. The cultural aspect of the man needs to provide for the woman, and there's a lot in terms of Arabic culture and blood. Your family is your everything. So it's incredibly shameful that at least during this time, it's incredibly shameful that Aladdin is not able to provide anything for his mother. Hereat the Moorman turned to Aladdin and said, "Why is this, O son of my brother, thou goest about in such ungraciousness? 'Tis a disgrace to thee and unsuitable for men like thyself. Thou art a youth of sense, O my son, and the child of honest folk. So 'tis for thee a shame to thy mother, a woman in years, should struggle to support thee. And now that thou hast grown to man's estate, it becometh thee to devise thee some device whereby thou canst live? O my child, look around thee, and Alhamdulillah, in this our town are many teachers of all manners of crafts, and nowhere are they more numerous." Alhamdulillah basically means thank God. So choose thee some calling which may please thee to the end that I establish thee therein. And when thou growest up, O my son, thou shalt have some business whereby to live. Happily thy father's industry may not be to thy liking, and, if so it be, choose thee some other handicraft which suiteth thee thy fancy. Then let me know, and I will aid thee with all I can, O my son. And when the Maghribi saw that Aladdin kept silent and made him no reply, he knew that the lad wanted none other occupation than a scapegrace life. He knew that so he said to him, "O son of my brother, let not my words seem harsh and hard to thee, for if, despite all I say, thou still dislike to learn a craft, I will open thee a merchant's store furnished with costliest stuffs, and thou shalt become famous amongst the folk, and take and give and buy and sell, and be well known to the city." Now, when Aladdin heard the words of his uncle, the Moorman, and the design of making him a khwaja, merchant and gentleman, he joyed exceedingly, knowing that such folk dress handsomely and fare delicately. So he looked at the Maghribi smiling and drooping his head groundwards and saying with the tongue of the case that he was content. The Maghribi, the magician, looked at Aladdin and saw him smiling, whereby he understood that the lad was satisfied to become a trader. So he said to him, "Since thou art content that I open thee a merchant's store, and make thee a gentleman, do thou, O my son of my brother, prove thyself a man, and inshallah, God willing, tomorrow I will take thee to the bazaar in the first place, and will have a fine suit of clothes cut out for thee, and such gear as merchants wear, and, secondly, I will look after a store for thee, and keep my word." Seems like pretty lofty promises. Now, Aladdin's mother had somewhat doubted the Moroccan being her brother-in-law, but as soon as she heard his promise of opening a merchant's store for her son and setting him up with stuffs and capital and so forth, the woman decided and determined in her mind that this Maghribi was in very sooth her husband's brother. Seeing that no stranger man would do such goodly deed by her son, so she began directing the lad to the right road and teaching him to cast ignorance from out his head and to prove himself a man. Moreover, she bade him ever obey his excellent uncle as though he were his son, to make up for the time he had wasted in forwardness with his fellows. After this she arose and spread the table, then served up supper. So all sat down and fell to eating and drinking, while the Maghribi conversed with Aladdin upon matters of business and the like, rejoicing him to such degree that he enjoyed no sleep that night. But when the Moorman saw that the dark hours were passed by, and the wine was drunken, he arose and sped to by his own stead. But ere going, he agreed to return next morning and take Aladdin and look to his suit of merchant's clothes being cut for him. And as soon as it was dawn, behold, the Maghribi rapped at the door, which was opened by Aladdin's mother. The Moorman, however, would not enter, but asked to take the lad with him to the market street. Accordingly, Aladdin went forth to his uncle and, wishing him good morning, kissed his hand, and the Moroccan took him by the hand and fared with him to the bazaar. There he entered a clothier's shop containing all kinds of clothes, and called for a suit of the most sumptuous, whereat the merchant brought him out his need, all wholly fashioned and ready sewn. The Moorman said to the lad, "Choose, O my child, whatso pleaseth thee." Aladdin rejoiced exceedingly, seeing that his uncle had given him his choice. So he picked out the suit most to his own liking, and the Moroccan paid to the merchant the price thereof in ready money. Presently he led the lad to the hammam baths, where they bathed. Hammam literally just means bathroom. It's kind of funny to think of someone translating hammam and just leaving the word hammam written right here, but just adding bath right next to it. Then they came out and drank sherbets, after which Aladdin arose and, donning his new dress, in huge joy and delight, went up to his uncle and kissed his hand and thanked him for his favors. Then there's actually an illustration here. So I want to see if you guys can take a look at it. Yeah. So that's supposed to be the store that Aladdin gets his suit from by his uncle. So you can kind of see that this is a very different dynamic from how the Disney movie kind of presents everything. And of course, like a movie, things need to be rewritten and everything, but it's fascinating kind of reading this, at least in my opinion. But I think I'm going to stop here. If you'd like me to continue reading this, or if you want like a really long session where I just because it's a lot of pages, if you wanted me to read all of it or read another story in the Arabian Nights, please let me know. Please leave a like and subscribe. It would really help. Yeah, I really like reading these stories. So thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great night. Bye.